Oceanova was once in a lifetime. They're breaking new ground, making something meaningful. Mining methane hydrate frozen beneath the seabed. There's alternatives, but none so plentiful. It's clean and safe. I couldn't say no.
Narcosis starts as an unnamed narrator recalls his experiences working in an underwater methane mining operation. He was out working in a diving suit at the bottom of the ocean floor when an 8.0 earthquake hits 50 miles from the underwater facilities. The shockwave decimates the base, and our yet unnamed protagonist is forced to make his way back to the base in an attempt to reach the escape pod so he can make it back to the surface. The title Narcosis is in reference to the effects of gases at deep sea pressures on the body. As we go on our adventure throughout the seafloor and the habitat, we'll encounter wildlife with bad attitudes, complete and total delusions, a constant fight to find oxygen, and an old-timey diver with mysterious motives. When I say these deep-sea creatures have bad attitudes, I mean it. Considering you're in a hulking dive suit and you aren't the typical fauna these creatures usually encounter, they will have no qualms attacking you. It's speculated at one point that perhaps the effects of the leaking methane has riled up these guys. The cuttlefish and the anglerfish can be fought off with your trusty Boy Scout knife, but spider crabs can only be avoided. They'll shatter the glass on your suit with the swiftness of the mongoose. As you make this trek, the narration makes way to audio clips with more context. Our protagonist made it out of this experience and was the last survivor of this incident, and is having an interview recounting his experiences. I'm going to cut to the chase here. The story in this game is excellent. The sparse usage of the interview clips laid on top of your experience was fantastic. The voice acting was very believable as well. He sounded like a regular guy reliving a tragic experience as opposed to, "Oh yeah, it's Nolan North again." The deep sea environments were beautiful and well realized. The actual gameplay, however, has my feelings split. Firstly, I should clarify something about myself. I've got a wife, 2 kids, I got a busy work and dad life going on. As a gamer, that's made me entirely impatient. I get usually 2 hours a night once the kids are in bed to play. I was never a huge fan of stealth games even before the kids, with the exception of a few games like Tenchu and Splinter Cell. Why do I hate stealth games? Because I hate the act of waiting for an opponent so I can do a thing. Does this game have stealth? Why the hell am I going on this tangent? See, that's the thing. Like, right at the beginning of the game, you're given the tools at your disposal. The aforementioned Boy Scout knife, cool, and a set of deployable flares. You also have a boost that can take you forward and ascend just a little bit, but it's on a cooldown. It has to be managed, so no boosting up high to a high up elevation, but it will work in a pinch, keep you out of a crevasse if you need be. While making my way back to the hab, I ended up face to face with my first spider crab. It was down a narrow passage. My first thought was I could use my flares and just back it down. The crab briefly is startled and rears back, but steadied itself, and then it proceeded to break me down. So then I tried using my boosters to charge past it. Wrong move, Shep. Eventually I sat and waited for the crab, and then it eventually decided to back off, and on its own it just let me pass. There's no alternative paths to get around it, no skills or things that I could use to get around it. You just have to be patient. This is an underwater experience in a diving suit, and one of the mechanics in the game is the fact that you have limited oxygen and you're constantly needing to restock. Perhaps the devs felt that making you wait for this crab to move while your air was dwindling would add tension, but to me, it just felt counterintuitive and it fueled my impatience. There were several of these moments where there's no alternative path like this, and as an impatient person like myself, it bothered me some. The oxygen mechanic in and of itself also inhibited my typical explorative playstyle some. You'll find some of the coworkers of my friend along the seafloor and inside the facilities who have met their disastrous end, and normally I would painstakingly clear out these areas to find every single one, but especially early in the game, my motivations were always about finding the next oxygen refill. Now, I said my feelings were split. The reason being that when this system works, it really does build tension. At one point, I took a path that led me to some underwater caves. There were tons of spider crabs, and there's no oxygen to be found. This time there was a wider passage and alternative paths to take. I found myself genuinely tense as I boosted in between these guys and navigated to safety. Perhaps their design philosophy was the right choice, and I'm just a cranky old man. I think it's important to discuss, though, because some people will be inclined to agree or disagree with me here. There's one segment that really irked me, though. At one point, you're forced to go through prolonged periods of platforming where one failure will cause you to restart. I hated this. You know what people love? Water segments and first-person platforming. Nailed it. No, but seriously, you're in a giant bulky suit, and looking down isn't an option. The environment's already inverted and strange at this point, so I missed a couple of these jumps, and restarting the segment from the beginning several times while my oxygen was also dwindling got under my skin. The thing that really bothers me is that this is a really interesting design, and it looks really cool, but it's marred by the fact that I would clip the furniture and not make a jump. Again, it isn't terribly difficult when all is said and done, so this could be a man screaming into the void here, but this is just my general opinions in regards to gameplay. The music does a great job, however, of building tension behind you, and I enjoyed it throughout the duration of the experience. The sound design in general was very good. The sound of crabs skittering around was always really great, and it does make you feel a bit paranoid, even if it's just little buggers who can't really hurt you. Although I will say some of the sound effects don't sound as though they were underwater per se. They're still well implemented, but if you care about that degree of accuracy, you will notice it. Now it's time to get to spoilers. I purchased this game for a very reasonable sale price on Steam. I may have had gripes in regards to a couple of gameplay decisions, but the story is worth experiencing for yourself, and the feeling of exploring underwater is really cool, and I haven't had an experience much like that. So I definitely still recommend you check it out for yourself if any of this sounds interesting. For the rest of you that don't care about spoilers, here we go. As you progress, you'll discover that the comms relay is damaged, and you won't be able to establish communications with other coworkers or, more importantly, the surface. This mining facility was state-of-the-art, and it had a staff of 25. You'll slowly find the bulk of these bodies in the depths, and it's definitely hard on our boy. Being at such depths in a diving suit for prolonged periods can have its effects on the body, and you will experience warped impressions of reality, and finding your dead friends has not made things any easier. Any diving suit you find will startle you and elevate your heart rate. The reality of these events are difficult for you. At times, the man in the diving suit will appear, and at first I was uncertain if I should fear this guy or lady. As time passes, the motivations of this person are still unclear, but they're obviously not a malevolent force. I followed him/her in another platforming section that's a lot more legible, and it was easy to maneuver. This segment I enjoyed a lot more than the aforementioned one. You eventually make it to a shuttle that will take you to another hub of the base, and along the way you're interrupted by a large crash. You awaken to a stunning field, and this is yet another visually beautiful area. But you weren't actually awake. When you actually awaken, you've run into another shuttle, and both of you are back at the bottom of the sea. We never confirm what happened to the inhabitants of that other vessel. This forces us through the cave segment that I mentioned earlier. It was really tense and absolutely beautiful to boot. At this time, I started to realize the oxygen drain is not actually constant. The devs have tweaked it to drain more slowly or quickly in segments where the containers are further closer together. Upon arriving at the other base, we have another short and sweet puzzle section where we have to turn on generators outside and open the doors. And also it includes another platforming segment that was made a lot easier because the ledges were easier to see, and the punishment for failure was also not as bad. It was just a short walk to walk back. We're really losing it now, though. The delusions are coming fast and frequent. Every dive suit we come across really affects us. There's a cylindrical puzzle room you get to that very much reminds me of a scene in 2001: A Space Odyssey that is very close to my heart. You have to find 5 different numbers for the door code hidden amongst the environment. I walked around the room several times before I noticed the giant looming corpse inside of it. Saying this game has amazing atmosphere doesn't really do it justice. One of the code numbers is carved into the wrist of this body of an individual who took matters in their own hands. This moment is worth pondering, and they give it to you with oxygen resupply so you can take your time to both figure out the puzzle and breathe in the moment. Once we escape this room, we run right into the ghosts of our coworkers represented in other diving suits. We then run into our other diver friend who dispatches them and relieve us from the torment of our friends. We also get to a segment with unlimited thrust in our suit to explore around. A part of me wants this game. Just complete freedom to wander around the seafloor with no gauges to monitor and only stirring imagery to be concerned with. As we finally approach the escape pod, the interviewer explains that our protagonist is Skip Mattis. He's being interviewed to discuss his book regarding these events. I'm going to let this final segment play out to let it have its full effect.
Can you read that for us?
Yeah. The list is getting shorter. The hatch opens with its usual reluctance, flooding the room with light. The pod is there. I'm going home. Tomorrow I'll be the sole survivor. But for now, I'm not alone.
How did you feel when you figured it out?
At that point, and that close, I was running on fear. So when I saw another suit in the room, it's almost too much to process. I couldn't believe that it was...
Virgil? Is that you?
Virgil made it. Just like me.
How did you get? I thought everyone was...
Only I'm locked inside the pod and he's locked out.
Can you hear me? I can't stop the launch. There's no override.
He's not coming back.
Oh, God. I'm sorry.
And that's on me.
30 seconds to evacuation.
So are you saying that if you did something differently, that Virgil would have lived?
That's right. Until I saw him. Fear in his eyes. I thought I was the only one. It was a bad call.
Evacuation. 5,
This can't be happening.
3, 2.
Oh, God. I'm sorry.
Evacuation commencing.
No.
We were not playing as Kip. We were playing as Virgil, the man left behind. There were moments in the interviews where the conversation was not matching up to my version of the events, and now this explains it. For instance, Kip said he never found out what happened to the other crew in the vessel that he struck, but now we know. It was Virgil. We heard about Kip's story, but we experienced Virgil's. This is why the diver following us around hasn't been mentioned in the conversation with the interviewer. My heart was truly broken at the realization that Virgil wasn't making it home. The game ends as Virgil joins the old diver among the seabed. This is the end for him, and this is the end of the game. I was ready for any number of twists, but not this. You got me, Honor Code. In spite of my reservations in regards to the gameplay, I thought it was a pretty good story that was well told. The voice acting hit with appropriate sincerity, and the accompanying score suitably backed you the whole way. There aren't many games with a setting at the bottom of the sea, and the psychological stress that would be inflicted on someone in a catastrophic scenario like this was approached with grace and decorum. This game is available to be played in VR, and although I didn't play it that way, I could imagine the immersion being next level if played as such. The full experience took me about 2.5 hours, including my assorted mishaps like diving into the depths trying to think outside the box or trying my luck with the crabs. You know, that's something I didn't discuss earlier. Perhaps use your flares for the darkest areas because the supplies for those are actually quite plentiful. I'm the type of guy who plays most of Resident Evil using the pistol to save my good ammo for a rainy day that never comes. Oh, I get 1 Mega Elixir in Final Fantasy II? Guess who's never using a Mega Elixir? Don't be dumb like me. Use the flares to give you a proper path, and if it falls into the darkness, don't follow it off a ledge to your death like I did. I would jump into a dark, giant crevasse because my desire to explore the unknown would get the best of me. In most games, clearing through a solitary lab by your lonesome with damage all around would be enough to get a person on edge. But in this case, they raise the stakes by making the whole lab submerged with water, and you're surrounded by your friends who are either overtaken by the disaster or the ones that made peace with it and took matters in their own hands. Honor Code did a commendable job with this game, and I'll be looking out for future projects of theirs. Although the entire game takes place in underwater environments, I was constantly getting vibes of 2001: A Space Odyssey or Sunshine, two space sci-fi thrillers that are some of my all-time favorites. If any of that sounds good to you, then I'd recommend it, assuming you have the patience for some of the shortcomings. Come for the exploration, stay for the story. Thanks to all that watched.